Welcome to the Sewing Machine Explained, the second video in a series aimed at helping you better understand your sewing machine, and I am Silenus. For those who are unfamiliar with these videos, or the point of these videos is I am a garber, which means that I am someone who makes clothing or items to be worn. My specialty is sewing. I have been sewing for, goodness, almost 2 decades, and I really want to help people truly understand their machines or to become less intimidated by the idea of buying or using a sewing machine. So, in the last video, we went over the various names for all of the essential parts of a sewing machine. And in this video, I'm actually going to tell you what these parts do. Um, I won't go into too much detail because, again, I don't want you to get intimidated, and one of the easiest ways to intimidate someone is to just throw way too much information at them. So I'm going to try and do bare bones, very simplified explanations, and we'll go from there. So jumping right in, something you don't see on the screen is the pedal that goes with the machines. All machines have a pedal. It is what, when engaged, activates the motor and actually starts the sewing process. By pressing harder or lighter controls the speed. All machines have a top speed, so there's no infinite speed, and you never have to worry about it just flying out of your hands. The hand wheel is part of the what I'll call drivetrain of the sewing machine, and it turns in a specific way. Having an exposed hand wheel is because there are times where you have to manually manipulate the sewing machine by turning the hand wheel. The hand wheel is exposed so that you can, if need be, manually control your sewing machine for like a couple stitches or to go back and correct something. The bobbin winder is used to, as the name suggests, wind a bobbin. And a bobbin is a spool that holds the thread so that you can complete a chain in which creates the stitching. So you would put an empty bobbin on here, thread up your machine specific to winding the bobbin, and the machine will load what is called load the bobbin, which is wind the thread onto the spool, giving you a full bobbin. And the wind bobbin stopper, um, this this as the name suggests, again, stops once enough pressure against it happens, stops the bobbin and actively disengages it from the motor. So it switches over the motor. Now you're winding a bobbin. Now you're sewing. The spool pin holds your needle thread or top thread in place, giving you a very convenient place to put it. Some people have spool holders that are external, but I always use mine. Usually only use the ones that aren't attached to the machine for spools that are too big for the machine. Your stitch width dial changes the placement of the needle, and you can't really see it right now, but it will change where it actively moves the needle as it's sewing. And in some cases, it changes the needle placement in a fixed manner where it may be on the left or on the right or in the middle. So in the middle is standard. Left or right is a manipulation that ends up happening from the dial here. The tension dial This is an important one, and a lot of new sewists don't realize that what I like to say the number is 90% of all sewing problems come down to tension, either in the bobbin or at the dial. So tension's really important because it controls the looseness or tightness of the thread as it's going down and being stitched. And if it's too loose, your links, because the basic explanation I give people of what stitching is the top thread and a bottom thread coming together. They meet in the middle, they link, the needle comes back up, and the process starts back over again. It meets the bobbin thread, it links, it comes back up, it meets the bobbin thread, it links, and so on. When your tension is off, either too high or too loose, one of those threads gets pulled in a direction that it shouldn't. So your links should be clean, and I'll go all over all this in later videos. But basically, this keeps your links of stitches balanced and looking clean. And this will change depending on what you're sewing and how wide your stitches are. So none of these are set and forget. They can be once you really know what you're doing, but for the most part, this helps you control the cleanness and correctness of tension in your threads. These are patterns in which, when you set it using your stitch selection dial, tells the machine to manipulate the placement of the needle in order to get a specific design in the thread as it stitches. So some of them are pretty involved, some of them not so much. They all have specific names. I don't know them all. This is a buttonhole stitch. This is a straight stitch, satin stitch, and that's basically the end of my knowledge of what the actual terms of stitches are, because I never use the rest of them. So like I explained with the stitch selection dial, just turning this shifts the mechanisms inside the machine to choose one of these, and then it will start stitching those. This is an extension of this, and what this is again, this is your stitch length dial. By changing this, it actively makes a stitch like wider, or longer, I should say, since we're talking length, longer or shorter. So if your stitches are really short, you'll have a whole lot of them in an inch, or if they're big, you'll have few of them in an inch. And that's where the term stitches per inch comes in. And you don't really hear that term outside of technical things, but knowing your stitches per inch really helps with the stability of your seams. If they're too wide, you could have a weak seam. If they're too tight, you can have perforation of the fabric. So knowing a good stitch per inch will definitely help you in the quality of what you create. And this is just an extension of that. It just helps me go beyond the minimum and maximum that this dial allows for. And there are various settings on this dial. So this is the widest the stitches can go. This is the shortest they can go, or sorry, longest, shortest. And then there's a letter in there that basically stands for the setting needed for a satin stitch. So the thread path feeds your thread from the spool all the way down to the needle in a way that allows the machine to really meter out the thread so that it doesn't get tangled or doesn't snap under tension. So again, and this is part of your thread path, your tension dial. So this controls a disc in your thread path that tightens or loosens on that thread passing through it. So the uptake lever helps pull in thread as the needle uh, maneuvers to, again, help prevent thread getting under too much tension and snapping, and it helps preload for the next uh, cycle of, or rotation of the needle, I should say. The reverse lever is one of your best tools for stabilizing. What it does is, as you're sewing and moving back and forth, you're creating what is called a backstitch, which is when the stitches overlap in opposing directions, creating a line of bulk stitches that won't come undone. So if you just stitch straight and then pull it off the machine and pull your two parts of fabric away, there's nothing to stop that line of stitches to start unraveling except a back stitch. So some people tie off their knots, or tie off their ends, but a back stitch is essential for stabilizing your seam at the start and at the end. So moving in, we can actually see that there are several parts clustered in this needle and presser foot area. And going back to what I was talking about with the the thread width dial, is as the needle goes down and comes back up, it moves. And the width of that is dictated by the setting of the stitch width dial. So I'm going to move that back to center so that as we work it and bring it back, the stitch back to number 2, which is the straight stitch, as we see, it goes back to straight. It doesn't move anymore. So in my previous video, I talked about the various parts, but I want to go back over it because it was kind of hard to see in that last video. So this is your needle clamp. If you unscrew it, you are able to drop out your needle and then load a new one in, which is essential for when a needle breaks. Uh, on here, this little lip here, that's the thread guide that along your thread path would hook your thread and then it would go to the needle. And then this is your presser foot. Mine is a quick release. Um, this is your presser foot lever, which raises. Sorry, I'll move my hand. So this is the presser foot lever. It raises and lowers your pressure foot. Um, and as you lift this, the disc that the tension dial controls actually opens up, allowing the thread to move more freely and unrestrained in the needle as you pull fabric or items away from the from under your presser foot. That way it doesn't snap or snap your needle. So my presser foot is a quick release, so I can just quick hit a lever and move my presser foot out of the way. And now we can really see those feed dogs. So these feed dogs, their purpose is to grip the fabric on the underside of the presser foot to really feed the fabric through and basically allows for the chains of stitches to have distance between them. The feed dogs are there to move things along. There are settings that in some machines that drop the feed dogs so that they are no longer in contact with the fabric. And that's useful for people who do quilting, but it quilts the layers of the blanket in that squiggly pattern that some people know in quilting. It's also really good for freeform sewing in general, freeform applique, freeform Essentially, you don't want it going in any one particular direction. You want the freedom to move and not be constrained to just going from front to back. I'm going to go ahead and put my presser foot back on, and with my machine again being a quick release, all I had to do was drop it and put it back on. This is your needle threader. And my needle is not in the highest position. So the needle threader is really useful. I love this thing. I use it every single time. It is for threading your needle. And it works by the thread comes down, it hooks on the thread guide. It then comes over here. There's a little hook that passes through the eye of the needle. You hold, and then you pull it through. It pulls through the eye of the needle. You then pull it the rest of the way, and you are now threaded. It is much quicker than trying to pass the needle through, pass the thread through the eye of the needle just by sight. My machine doesn't have this, but usually there's a little piece of white paper on the post of the presser foot, and that is to make seeing the eye of the needle much easier. So there we have it, folks. That is about as simplified as I can explain the various parts on this machine and what they do. Please keep an eye out for my next videos. We'll be going over how to thread a sewing machine. Future videos will include the anatomy of a serger, a serger explained, and how to thread a serger. We will then go into the various ways of learning to actively sew, whether that's just learning how to create your very first seam, all the way to making a garment. So please subscribe to this channel, as I truly hope this channel helps you along your path to understanding how to sew and how to progress in the skill of sewing. Once again, my name is Silenus, and thank you for joining me for the Sewing Machine Explained.